Hi, loves, and welcome to the With Love Always podcast, a podcast to help you live the life you were created for. We are your hosts and your friends, Bree
and Marissa,
and we're so grateful you're here.
We pray you listen and leave feeling more inspired, encouraged, and uplifted.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode. I am so grateful, as always, that you are tuning in today. For today's episode, you are tuning into my first ever solo episode on With Love Always. I'm so excited to sit down with you guys and have a very personal, unlike ever before conversation, because today I'm going to be inviting you guys into a very vulnerable part of my life and into my story, and that is my journey with an eating disorder. And I'm so grateful to be inviting you guys into this part of my heart and for you guys to know a little bit more of the struggles and hardships I've gone through. And ultimately, I just felt like this was an invitation for me to share because it was something that I'm so grateful for the triumphs I've experienced in my life. And when reflecting on the graves that my life has gone through, with this being such a monumental part of my life, my story, my testimony, I knew that my graves could be the gardens for someone else. And so when I was reflecting and deciding and praying into whether or not to share this story, I've always known it's been a story that is so personal, so vulnerable, and truly so hard to talk about. But after reflecting on different conversations I've been having with friends, different trends I've been seeing on social media, different heartbreaks that I have been witnessing from both up close and afar, I just felt like God was inviting me to share this very challenging part of my life and my story as a token of peace, as a token of freedom, as a token of healing for someone out there who may be in this very moment struggling with bad body image, with an eating disorder, with just a distorted view of themselves. And I want to be this friend to you ultimately that can remind you, encourage you, be alongside you and say, hey, I've been there in your very shoes, and I promise that there is beautiful freedom available to you. So bear with me, because while I have both prepared, I also haven't fully prepared for this episode. And I'm just truly entrusted, as always, that whatever downloads God gives me in this moment as I speak, that they would be the perfect words that are meant to be intended for your listening ears. And even if they come out imperfectly, I know that in my imperfection, that is the words that I am meant to declare and speak and announce today. So I just pray too that I imagine if you are tuning into this podcast today, that there's something about this story that, I don't know, fascinates you, or there's something about this story that feels very personal to you. Maybe you right now are choosing to tune into this testimony of mine because you are currently going through an eating disorder, or you're currently, navigating a very unhealthy relationship with food. Maybe you are currently fighting the devastation of bad body image or body dysmorphia. Or maybe you are on some sort of end of the spectrum of just feeling just dissatisfied, uncomfortable in your body, or maybe your mind is just in a really dark place. And I just want to be a freedom keeper once again. I just feel like that word specifically, as I was just praying into this episode, was the description that God was putting and assigning over me, inviting you guys into this. So with all that said, I'm going to share my very honest, vulnerable journey through my eating disorder, and I'm going to try to do it with as much grace as possible, with the ultimate intention and the ultimate hope that this would encourage, inspire, heal, and provoke freedom for you. I also imagine, truly, you guys, like as I've been envisioning myself speaking on this, I have cried so many times, and I literally cried on the drive over to the studio today, thinking specifically about encouraging anyone listening to this episode. And so I'm not going to apologize for my tears because they are just so real. And I just want to express that any of the tears that I shed in this episode, any of the emotions that this topic provokes, yes, it's emotional because this is my story and there's so much depths and there's so much heartache, but there's also so much victory and there's so much abundance and there's so much freedom. But ultimately, the source of my tears, if I do cry at any point in this episode, is truly because I just feel it so heavy on my heart that there are women out there and men out there who need freedom in this area. And like I always say in every single episode, topics are truly decided upon because of the personal relevance in our lives. And I felt God really pushing me to finally share this story because I have seen enough of my friends recently struggle with the pressures that society, that living in LA, that social media, that the wellness industry brings. And my heart breaks for such specific people, but my heart also breaks for you who's listening, who I may have never met. So I love you guys. And with all of that said, I'm going to try my best to share a little glimpse of my story of walking through an eating disorder. I had an eating disorder for almost 7 years of my life, and sitting here today as someone who is so free, I'm so excited to invite you guys into this journey of mine. So I'll give you as much of a brief backstory on my journey with an eating disorder as possible. And I won't dive into too many immense details, but I do want to share and invite as much as possible to really give you guys such a tangible glimpse of the heartache and the grievance that an eating disorder did have plagued over my life. And so I have a lot of experience in the realms of an eating disorder in the sense that it was an occurrence that happened to me, but also an occurrence that happened to a really close loved one of mine. And it was a heartache and a grievance that I have witnessed a lot throughout truly the duration of my childhood. And so with that said, I feel like I have such a tender heart and such an empathetic heart towards this topic today, because I think especially in today's day and age, bad body image, self-hatred, negative thoughts about ourselves has become so normalized. And if there's anything that I can encourage through sharing my story today, is that the battles of your mind, the wounds of your perception of yourself, they are not normal and they don't have to be your normal. And so my story with an eating disorder, specifically anorexia, is what I struggled with. And I just want to also disclose that if anyone is struggling with a specific eating disorder, I just pray that no words that I say or select today would be triggering for you, but in fact that they would make you feel so seen and validated that you are not alone in the painful journey. But with that, I do want to just disclose that I will be sharing some details of my eating disorder story. So if anything is potentially triggering for you, I just pray that at any point in time you could silence this episode and return back to yourself. But with that said, I first began to experience the pain of my eating disorder when I was 13 years old. And for context, and I'm just going to share my truths of, who I am, my genetics, all that sort of stuff. I am genetically someone who, especially at 13 years old, pre-puberty, was, built and brought into this world in a smaller framed body. And especially pre-puberty, I remember being in 7th grade, and it was for the first time in my life that I started receiving praise from my fellow friends and classmates for being small. And it was truly up until that point in my life, like I had never thought about my weight. I never thought about my frame. I had no context in my mind if I was smaller, bigger, like none of that was like even something that I thought about when I thought of people. I think there is that beautiful childlike innocence to all of us at one point in our life where we do not think about our bodies and we do not think about what we eat. We just eat to nourish our bodies and we just exist in the awestruck and wonder of being a child. And up until I was 13 years old, I was never aware that I was, built genetically in a smaller framed body. And so I remember around that age, it was for the very first time that it was brought to my attention that I was small. And I think very quickly I started around that age, people are starting to go through puberty. They're starting to care about how they look. We're starting to care about what boys think of us, all that sort of stuff. And I realized that I was starting to receive praise for the way that I looked. And long story short, I know the complexities of an eating disorder are so stemmed to such personal testimonies and reasons for every individual. But I think I realized at that age that I was receiving praise for looking a certain way, and it made me yearn and long to receive more praise in that same way. And so for whatever rhyme or reason, and there is so many more depths to that, of course, of just brokenness that I was experiencing at that tender age of 13, of just not knowing who I am. How could I? That's something I'm still learning today, but just trying to seek and find identity, try to seek and find a sense of worth, a sense of beauty for the first time in my life. And when I caught a glimpse of something that could make me beautiful and something that I was receiving validation in, something that was giving me a sense of worth and distinguishment, I started running with it. And so when I realized that I was receiving praise for my body, I just very quickly started to continue to subtract things from my life, food from my life, and in addition, add more exercise into my life. And before I knew it, I had lost almost 30 pounds on my already fragile pre-puberty body and hit a very low weight that most children do not even weigh. I was around at my lowest, around 50 to 60 pounds at 5'5", and I don't share that to disclose weight as the point of context, because I think an eating disorder is so outside of weight. It doesn't have to even affect your weight visually, but I share that to even invite just a greater glimpse of the severity of the depths in which my eating disorder took me. And so consider, once again, it was pre-puberty for myself. And so I was already very, very small, but at the lowest of my low in the depths of my eating disorder, I was at a weight that was so low that I knew I would no longer be able to do all of my favorite things. I didn't have the energy to run fast on the track team. I didn't have the energy to, participate on the cross country team. It was to a point where my coaches were noticing. Of course, my family was noticing. And I do feel grateful that there was a gap when I was actually at my lowest weight visually, when I was at my weakest, that it was the summer before my 8th grade year. And I knew that in order for me to be able to continue to live my life, to not be asked by my coaches what's wrong, to be able to perform on the cross country team the next year, and to be able to live my life as a child, as I still was at 13 years old, I knew that I had to gain the weight back. And so essentially the summer between 7th and 8th grade, I binge ate my way back up to the weight that I was prior to me losing any weight. And though physically, externally, that would seem like, okay, end of the story. She returned back to her 8th grade year of school and she looked like she was never sick in the first place. But that is where the deception of eating disorders exist, is that sometimes it doesn't always physically display externally through your physical being, but it's also the presence and the way that your mind operates. And so though at 13 years old, I experienced the depths of anorexia. I experienced the depths of losing a dramatic amount of weight, the depths of being so hindered and having to be almost pulled out of all school activities. I was definitely a level of concern from my teachers and my coaches. Though I was able to return back to a weight into which nobody would question, what nobody saw was the plague of my mind, the battle and the fight that I would fight from 13 all the way up till I was 20 years old. And so, yeah, that really was such a big moment of my eating disorder, the summer that I lost a lot of weight and had to gain it all back. But really the bulk of my journey and what I consider the journey of my eating disorder was between the ages of 13 to 20, when externally everything seemed fine and healthy, but internally I was decaying. From the ages of 13 to 20, I really struggled with exercise addictions. I would work out sometimes 3-4 times a day, and I usually did that in secret. I just was obsessed with moving my body. I was obsessed with what I was fueling my body with. And though I had, entered this realm of being healthy and being able to maintain a healthy, weight on my body, and I was able to progress through puberty, I really battled. Every day was a battle of what I was putting into my body, what I was eating. I was so scared of eating things that were unhealthy. The amount of guilt that I would feel when I ate something that wasn't healthy, the amount of guilt I would feel if I didn't exercise my 3 times a day. And that would come in waves and it would ebb and flow. But it was this persistence, self-obsession with the way that my body looked, and this persistence sense of worth that was only attached to my body. And there was so many other external factors that really contributed to me being in the depths of insecurity with my body. And I think that is the thing. If you are struggling with an eating disorder and you feel the pains of your self-obsession and your self-worth being attached to how you look, sometimes there's really nothing that you can truly pinpoint, describe, or express as to why you have taken your habits and your life and your mind to such extremities. But truly, I just want to alleviate even myself and anyone who's listening that you do not need a perfect description for why you are struggling with an eating disorder in the first place. There isn't a perfect trigger. There isn't a perfect thing that is keeping you motivated to keep going. And that's okay. But it was something that was so beyond description for me. I couldn't realize or figure out why I was so fixated on controlling my body in the way that I was. But that was what plagued me for so many years of my life. Through my exercise addictions, through my hyperfixation with what I ate, I had a very distinct moment when I was 15 and I finally started my period. And I remember actually crying my eyes out when I finally started my period, because I remember thinking and researching and reading online, and Google wasn't even as vast as it is today, but I remember reading online that period loss or the inability to have children is something that could be the result of an eating disorder. And from a very young age, I was really harming my body from 13 to 15, which is such pivotal times in your physical growth, especially as a woman. And so I remember when I finally got my period, even to this day, thinking and remembering that moment makes me really emotional, because I was so convinced that I had already done enough harm in my body that I would never have a period, and that there was a risk that I would never be able to have children because of the way that I was depriving and hurting and harming my body. And so I remember being 15, getting my period and being like, thank you, God. I actually didn't know God then, so I definitely wasn't thanking God, but I just remember the wave of relief of thinking, oh my gosh, there is a possibility that I didn't harm my body as much as I thought I did. So with that said, that was a very pivotal moment and big moment in my development and journey through my eating disorder, where I had this stroke of hope of, maybe there is going to be life beyond this. But all that's to say, I continue to struggle with exercise addictions and hyperfixation on healthy eating. Throughout a majority, if not all of my teenage years, I was very obsessed with my weight. I was very obsessed with the size jeans I was wearing. And I was always body checking myself and was always so convinced that if there was any change in my physical body, that it would be enough to change my physical beauty, which would be enough to change my sense of self-worth to those around me. And so it was just this very detrimental cycle that lasted all throughout my teenage years, that by the time I arrived to college and was away from my family, I honestly thought, you know what? I'm 18 years old. Like, this is just probably the way that I'm going to think for the rest of my life. And I remember a very distinct moment when I got to college and thought, this just must be everyone's normal. Like, this must be normal for everyone. Everyone hates themselves. Everyone has self-obsessive thoughts when it comes to their bodies. Everyone struggles to look a certain way and has a iffy relationship with food. I was just so convinced that this has to be the way that everyone operates and everyone thinks, because this is the way that I think. And it wasn't until I met one of my best friends in college that I then realized, after being a witness of her healthy relationship with food and her lack of care or concern of how her body looked, not because she wasn't taking care of her body and not because she wasn't nourishing her body and moving her body and honoring her body, but it just wasn't a level of concern for her. That was the first moment in my life that I realized, whoa, wait a second. This level of self-obsession is actually not normal, and this is actually not everybody's reality. And so I had a lot of self-revelation when I came to college and realized, you know what? If I can choose, I do not want to live with this for the rest of my life. I do not want to live for the rest of my life calculating what I'm going to eat that day. I do not want to live for the rest of my life with a level of concern of how much I'm moving my body that day. I don't want to live the rest of my life with the deep want and desire to be thin, because I am so convinced that that is the only sense of self-worth I will carry into a room. I do not want to live with the false security that the thinner that I am, the more desirable I am by men. And there was so many just broken things in my identity and in the way that I was searching for validation in my life that all were keeping me in the places that I was at. And long story short, everyone's journey towards freedom is so different. And I know that my journey towards freedom to this very day is so different than others, but truly my freedom story was unlocked when I met and encountered God for the first time in my life. I came to faith at 19, and I would say at 20 is when my freedom from my eating disorder truly wholeheartedly began. And there's so many depths and details to that. And I know that that's not a solution to a struggle that you may be embarking on right now if you're listening to this and you are struggling through an eating disorder. But my heart and my intention with this episode is not to provide a solution, but it's to provide hope, encouragement, and to make you feel seen and letting you know that you are not alone in what you are currently walking through. But essentially, I found God when I was 19 years old, and that is a whole story within itself. That's a whole testimony within itself. And there's so many depths and major moments in my life that were transformed. And one of those was truly the renewing of my mind. I remember when I came to God, I just was so desperate. And I just asked, I was like, God, I don't want to think this way for the rest of my life. I don't want to struggle with this for the rest of my life. And I remember so many tangible moments where all of a sudden the bondage of my mind was just broken free. And I remember I was also so proactive. I remember at the time, right when I started going to church and believing in God and having so many things in my life transform, I was also in one of the lowest moments of my life I'd ever been. I had severe panic attacks. I had severe self-harm thoughts. I literally hated who I was. The amount of self-hatred I had was above and beyond insecurity. It was deep self-hatred to where I thought I had no sense of worth, no sense of purpose, no sense of value. And I lived with the heaviness of those thoughts day in and day out. And it's like breaks my heart to even think about that being who I once was. And when I started believing in God, it was for the first time in my life that I believed I had value outside of how I looked and outside of what anyone thought of me. And so I remember something so tangibly that I would do is every single day I would journal. And I would write down all the things that I would think about myself. And I would write down that, I thought I was ugly. I thought I was fat. I thought I was all these things, whatever it was, to the lengths and depths of the harmful thoughts that I had about myself. And then I would write exactly beside it, I'd be like, but God says that I am beloved. God says that I am worthy. God says that I am treasured. God says that my worth has nothing to do with how I look. And I practiced that day in, day out. And even though I did not believe it, I would look at myself in the mirror and say, Brie thinks she's ugly, but God says that I'm beloved. And I repeated those statements over myself every single day until one day I started realizing that I was literally rewiring my brain in the belief and in the perception of myself. And to say that at age 20, the moment I met God was the moment I was set free would not do my story justice, because my story continues all the way until today, present day. And there has been a history and a journey and a battle and a daily fight to be set free. There have been people who have spoken into my story, who have loved me, held my hand, cried with me when I was afraid. There have been people who've showed me what a healthy relationship with food looks like, shown me what it looks like to be free, have invited freedom into my life. There's so many key factors, moments, and memories and daily battles that the past, 8 years of my life, from 20 to now 28, I have gone through to now arrive to the point of freedom I'm at today. So there's so many intricacies in my story, but I share that little glimpse, that little overview, hopefully in the greatest source of light for anyone who is perhaps going through the same battle right now, whether you feel like you are in the depths of it, whether you just need to be told that the way that you're thinking is not normal, or it's not permanent. There's not a forever bearance of that over your mind or over your life, or whether you are on the other side of an eating disorder and you're still fighting, you're still battling. I just want you to feel so seen and supported and loved through that glimpse of my story. And so I just want to continue forward beyond my story and just speak out loud and just affirm that we live in a day and age that is so beautiful with social media. You guys know, if you know me personally through the podcast, how much I love social media. I love sharing with you guys. I love these conversations. I love this platform to be able to have conversations with people I may never be able to meet face to face, but hopefully you always feel so invited to the table and you feel like you're on a FaceTime call with me. But I think also the detriment of social media and the detriment of access to people, because we live in such a world in which everything is so quick and easy to access. More than ever before, we are getting access to loads and loads of information on wellness, on what is best for your body, what foods you should be eating, so on and so forth. And I feel like I even have a more personal tie because I am in the wellness industry and the fitness industry, and I do see more so the dark side of the wellness and fitness industry, just because I'm consuming extra amounts of it on social media. And it is truly just so beyond me how much information we are constantly digesting. And it is exhausting. It is exhausting to be told that you should be working out this way. It's exhausting to always be seeing that this is the trick to getting abs and this is the trick to, looking a certain way in time for summer, or this is what you should be eating, or, oats are bad, or this or that. Like, we're always being told that everything we're doing is wrong and that you need to change in order to do something right. And there's beauty in that. There's beauty in people's stories. There's beauty in being encouraged and enlightened through someone else's personal journey with their health and wellness. But when it comes to a point where there's so much noise that we literally have no concept of what we actually want to do with our own lives, and we are in constant pursuit and constantly striving to look and aspire like someone else, that is where the detriment comes in. And I am just seeing so many women, so many close friends of mine, so many acquaintances, so many even friends on social media begin to just lose themselves at the expense of what social media is telling them they need to look like. I hear all the time that people want to have abs like this person, or want to have a butt like this person, or want to, have a body like this person. And what if instead of always aspiring to be like someone else, to look like someone else, to transform like someone else, to follow what someone else is doing, what if the language is more of just being the best version of who we are? I don't want to have abs like someone else. I don't want to eat like someone else. I don't want to have a butt like someone else. I don't want to have a morning routine or ritual like someone else. I want to have that like Brie. Like, what does that really look like for me? And I think that is where the detriment of social media comes in, because it's like, since when is normalizing always wanting to aspire like someone else become the thing that we are looking to? Like, what if we truly were able to be inspired versus convinced that what we are doing is wrong and what everyone else is doing is right? And I think that's where we have to be so careful of what we are infiltrating our minds with, and myself included. As someone who did disclose, it's like, it is to this day still a daily fight in the patterns and ways and thinkings of my mind, that I have to be so cautious of what I'm even exposing myself to on social media with the fitness industry and with the wellness industry. Because to be honest, some of it is really triggering for me, and some of it makes me feel like I'm doing all my workouts wrong, and I'm eating wrong, and everything I'm doing is wrong, and that's why I don't look like her, when maybe God was like, Brie, you were never meant to look like her. You were meant to look like yourself. And with all that said, I just want to even share and disclose some signs of self-obsession and harm in the name of wellness, because I think so often, like I said at the beginning of my story, we so normalize the way that we think, and we so normalize the broken insecurities, the comparison, the obsession with exercise, the obsession with food. And whether you are experiencing a quote unquote extreme of anorexia or any other form of an eating disorder, such as binge eating or bulimia or whatever it is, whether you feel like you have a diagnosed, quote unquote, diagnosed eating disorder, or you just have disordered thoughts around eating, either way, those are not God's design for you. And that is not normal. And I think we live in a day and age where, unfortunately, disordered ways of eating and disordered ways of exercising is normalized. And I think that's even the grievance and the heartbreak that I see is, when did eating 3 meals a day become abnormal? When did working out once a day become abnormal? What is becoming normalized is the obsession with what we are always consuming and putting into our bodies. There is a time and place. That's a whole separate episode within itself of my perspective and views and language around moving my body and exercise. We are intended to honor our bodies, but we are not intended to make ourselves sick in the name of wellness. And I think that's where the contradiction lies. If you are depriving yourself, if you are comparing yourself, if you are literally all concerned with what you are eating, with how you look, if you are constantly navigating, wrestling, and obsessing over every single calorie that is going in your body, that is not sustainable. And that is evidence that you are struggling through the trenches of an eating disorder. And I think another sign too is like body checking. If you are always looking in the mirror and looking at every single reflection, whether it's a reflection in the car window, in the windows you're walking by, like if you're always checking your body and always looking at it to see if it changed or to see how it looks from a certain angle, that's also a key telling sign of just disordered patterns of the mind. And that is something, unfortunately, so many of us struggle with. And that is something, unfortunately, I do struggle with as well from time to time. And I think I'm sharing all this to say how unfortunate it is that we have normalized these extremities as just the reality of the way our minds work, when in reality, social media, society has constructed this false narrative of the way we should view working out, eating, ourselves, our bodies, our worth. And that does not have to be the narrative that we live by, because truly the cost of living in this way, if you are walking through this, whether, like I said, you're in the trenches of it, you're realizing it for the first time through this conversation with me, or you're on the other side of it where you're on the pathway towards so much freedom, the cost of self-obsession, the cost of disordered eating is truly your life. It is your whole life. It is all consuming. Your mind is the least safe place in the world for you. And I know what it's like just as much as you may know what it's like to have your mind to be such a dark, unsafe, scary place, to be constantly weighed down by the weight of the thoughts of yourself. It really does steal, kill, and destroy you. It really does take away from the joy of your day-to-day life. You can't live your life. You can't bear your life. When you are out with friends, all you're thinking about is how much you're eating. When you overindulge or, choose that glass of wine, all you're thinking about when you go home at night is the guilt that you are ridden with. All you're thinking about is how you can work it off or how you can get rid of it in your body. And it is an all-consuming source of defeat that will kill your mind, your life, your hope, your joy, your social life, your friendships, every single beautiful, wonderful gift in your life. It literally manipulates and destroys. And I know that sounds so intense. And for some who are listening, maybe your disordered thoughts hasn't led you to that place. But if you can think and recollect of one moment in your life, at least once, where you allowed the insecurity of your body and your clothes to steal your joy from the moment you entered into a room, then that is evidence of just how much the toxicity of these thoughts can steal, kill, and destroy your life to whatever degree it is. And so I just want to speak into that. And I want to speak that I cannot sit here and say that I confidently never, ever struggle with that, because I do. There are moments I struggle. There are moments I feel a distorted view about my body. There are moments when I start attaching my sense of worth and being so convinced that if my abs looked a certain way, if my jeans fit a little bit better, then I would be more desirable. But in reality is the thing that always returns me back to a place of peace is that I know the depths and the darkness in which I once have been in, and to find the freedom that I have now walked in and been walking in and been pursuing the past 8 years of my life, nothing is comparative to that freedom in my life. Nothing is comparative to in moments when I feel so defeated by how my body looks or feels, to know that even yet when I don't feel it, and even yet when maybe the world's not affirming it of me, I am still God's beloved, and I am still treasured, and I still have innate worth that has nothing to do with the attachment of how I look in my physical being. And I know that that's so hard to say and to believe, because that is reality. We live in a world where we have attached our sense of worth to our external, and it would be wrong of me to say that that does not absolutely matter. But I just want to say and to encourage and to speak freedom, that there is a sense of identity that is going to become so detached from how you look. And that is going to be the thing that leads you to freedom. I know for myself, something that really deeply motivated me to find freedom is, and it still motivates me as I'm continuing to be refined and continuing to heal day after day, year after year of my life, is when I think about the blessing of being a mother one day, even taking you guys back to the story of getting my period when I was 15, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, there's hope. Like, I can still become a mother. I haven't absolutely hurt and harmed my body so much that is a joy that is not accessible to me anymore. When I had that moment, and as a woman who does deeply desire to become a mother one day, I use that as such a motivating factor and use that as such a motivating factor throughout my journey of healing, is to be so reminded that my body gets to be the home for a beautiful, wonderful blessing one day. And I don't want to try to make my body safe for my future child in the future. I want my body to be a safe place now. My body is going to be the home that is going to grow my future family. And I want to be creating a environment within my body that is so safe, so sound, that when that time comes and I'm ready to step into that commitment of becoming a mother, my body is going to have been prepared for years before that baby ever got to be in my belly. And I think about that also with my mind. Like, what kind of mother do I want to be one day? Do I want to be a mother that my kids look up to and think, wow, my mom has such a beautiful sense of her self-worth. My mom has a beautiful language around food. My mom has a beautiful relationship with herself. And I know right now on social media, there's like a trend, like not necessarily a trend in like it's a trend in like it's popular. Like people are making videos of like their almond mom and like moms who have really unhealthy relationships with food and have like distorted the child's like view of themselves and view of their relationship with food and exercise and all that sort of stuff. And that truthfully is like the greatest motive more than anything for me, is thinking about becoming a mom and thinking about how my body is going to be home to a beautiful, wonderful blessing one day, but also how my words are going to be the home for my physical child to grow up in, but also the home in which they're building in their own minds. And that for me was such a motive throughout my healing journey, and is still a motive through my healing journey to this day. In the sense of, I want my mind to be such a safe place, such a source of refuge, that when someone else's life depends on mine, I am a safe refuge for this child. I'm a safe refuge for them to come to and to feel housed under and to feel sheltered beneath. And I also think about it as well. The greatest joy of my life since I found freedom in my eating disorder is to know that I can step into a sense of confidence, a sense of self that invites confidence in other people. We all know what it's like to be in a room with someone who's so deeply insecure, to be at a table with someone who's struggling with their relationship with food, and all that energy causes you to do is to start adopting your own sense of insecurity, starting to self-obsess with yourself. And that's what insecurity does. Insecurity breeds insecurity. Confidence breeds confidence. In my presence, I always knew I want to be someone that is a freedom keeper for someone. I want to be someone that invites confidence into someone else. I want someone to look at themselves for the first time in a new light, detached of how they look, because I am walking in that confidence. I want to be someone that in their presence, they feel an invitation of peace, an invitation of freedom, an invitation of healing. And for me, that was such a motive of, I feel like my life is intended and has been committed to bringing freedom and peace and healing to other people. And the only way I can do that is by making my own mind a safe harbor for itself first. So I just want to encourage you guys, when you guys are in your 80s and you're thinking about back to your 20s, you are not going to remember this decade of your life, or 30s or 40s or whatever age you are that is tuning into this episode, whether you're a teenager or beyond my own years. You are not going to be looking back at a photo of yourself and thinking about how thin you looked, thinking about how your abs looked, thinking about any of those things, what size jeans you wore. You're going to be thinking about the relationships you built. You're going to be thinking about the experiences you had. You're going to be thinking about the ways that you were able to impact people so beyond anything that you looked at or anything you looked like. And I just want to encourage you guys that if you feel the pains of the struggle, if you feel the pains of depriving yourself, if you feel the heartaches of never feeling good enough and never feeling beautiful enough and never feeling like you can ever imagine a world where you will be set free, I want to promise you one thing, and please take my words with every ounce of gravity that I intend them for. Freedom is so, so, so possible. I look at my life now, and one of the greatest truly greatest compliments that I receive when I share with someone on a personal level that I had an eating disorder. One of the greatest compliments I receive is I would have never known. And the reason why that is one of the greatest honors to receive is because I have developed and do have such a healthy relationship with food, such a beautiful relationship with exercise. And I honor my body because I want to honor God. I honor my body because I want to be able to step into all of the wonderful roles I will live in this life. The role of being a friend for now, the role of being a wife one day, the role of being a mother one day, the role of being a grandma one day. Like, I am nourishing and honoring my body, not to distort my body, not to please others with their eyes, with my body. I am honoring my body because I have a lot of life to live beyond just myself, beyond just how I look like in clothes. I have a lot of life to live and a lot of people to love along the way that I cannot afford to be so self-obsessed with myself and so in the darkness of my own mind. I have people to love, and the less I can think and worry about food, the better, because it gives me more capacity to love and be available for other people. And I just want to remind you guys that healing is so possible. Your journey is going to look so different than mine. And I would love to speak more specifically into any area that you guys want to hear from me from, but I just want to say that freedom is available. And if you are having to distort your body, deprive your body, manipulate your body, ask yourself, is this sustainable long term? Is this sustainable for the rest of my life? If the cost of looking this way is at the expense of myself, is that worth it? Answer that for yourself. Is this a pattern in which you would want to see your future child walking in one day? Is this a pattern that you would want your friends to replicate of you one day? Is this a thought of yourself that you would want to hear your husband or your wife speaking over themselves? Like, if the answer is no to any of those things, if this is not a pattern you would want to see repeated or manipulated or expressed in anyone else, then why is it something that you are willing to do for yourself and willing to harm yourself in? And I know it's not that simple, but I do know one thing, that freedom is calling your name. And if you are listening to this episode, it's because God intended for your ears to listen, not because my words are perfect and not because I am the ultimate bearer of freedom, but because I am a freedom keeper and I have had experience of freedom in this lifetime with this specific heartache. And so I want to encourage you guys, healing is available for you. And I cannot repeat that enough because I feel like that is the narrative that God is just putting on my heart so much. Ask yourself, is this a lifestyle, a mindset that you can sustain for the rest of your life? If it's not, then it's not intended for you. The life you are meant to live is the one in which you don't have to think, manipulate, distort, or hurt and harm yourself in the process. I think about my relationship with food today, and I love nourishing my body. I love honoring my body. I love moving my body, but also I love living my life. I love being present with friends. I love trying new foods. I love saying yes to the things that are offered before me, and not just food and exercise, but experiences. And this is the life, and this is the body, and this is the aesthetic that I'm living in when I am simply living and embracing my life in beautiful ways. This is the body that was nourished and fueled so beautifully and so powerfully to be able to sustain myself through running 2 marathons. Like, that was a whole beautiful, healing, transformative journey within itself of truly needing to fuel my body to such big extremes to physically be capable of running such a big race, like 26 miles in a marathon. That was such a healing journey. Like, a strong, capable, able body that is able to flourish, do extremely hard physical things, but also be extremely present with the people I love. That is worth it, above and beyond what anyone could ever think about my body, beyond what I would ever think of my body. That freedom is the greatest taste there ever was. And so I just want to remind you that You might feel so alone. You might feel so abandoned. You might feel like there's no life beyond this right here, right now. But I promise you, as someone who once declared that this was my normal for the rest of my life, as someone who is once so convinced that for the rest of my life, I would always have this thorn in my flesh of feeling so deeply insecure, self-obsessive, self-restrictive, and harmful with my body. It does not have to be a reality. There is a world in which your life can exist apart from this. There is a version of yourself, a version of your mind, a version of your body that is going to be more beautiful than the one that you're trying so desperately to cling on to. So I pray that this can be truly the ultimate source. Not the ultimate source, because I'm not the ultimate source and my words are not perfect. I know that, but I truly pray that this can be a source of hope for you. And know that my heart has just prayed and broken for you without even knowing some of you by name. My heart breaks for you because I love you so much. And thank you, Jesus, for giving me freedom from my eating disorder so I have the capacity to love you and to share a story that once would make me tremble because I was in the depths of the darkness, but now I am free. And because I am free, I can share this story with you today because it's not something that holds me hostage. It's not something that I'm ashamed of. It's something I'm so proud I overcame. And I want to share and delight and rejoice and lead you to victory in the same exact way. And so I just want to end and close with this verse. And it's Matthew 6:25. And it says, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, or what you will wear. Because is life not more than just food, and your body more than the clothes that you wear?" I love you guys so much. Thank you for bearing with me through my jumbled thoughts. I pray that they were just such an encouragement to you, and I pray that you feel lighter in this moment. I pray that you feel the invitation of peace over you, and truly, if there's anything more that you would want me to share on this topic, I know there's so many sectors, there's so many pathways this conversation could have gone, and this was just one avenue that I felt so inclined to share. But if there's anything else you guys would love to see from me in regards to this topic, I would love to share, because like I said, I can share with confidence because there's no shame attached to this part of my story. There is victory, and I share the victory to lead you to victory. I love you guys so much. You are so beloved. You are so worthy of a free life. And thank you so much for tuning into this conversation with me today. My first ever solo episode. I don't even know if I took a breath that entire episode, but I love you guys with my whole heart and whole being to the depths of what the word love means. And I will see you guys in our next episode. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much for listening. We pray this episode was encouraging and life-giving. If you found it valuable, please share it with a friend, leave a review, and subscribe.
And be sure to follow us along over on Instagram at With Love Always Podcast. Signing off with all of our love always, Bree
And Marissa.